Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the No Censorship podcast with your two co hosts, James and Megan. Thank you so much for all the support you've been giving us so far. Really excited to get into another episode with you, Megan. Now, as you're aware, I'm in a bit of a situation at the moment where I'm looking for a new job opportunity, and as a result of that, I've had a lot of spare time on my hands. So I was scrolling Netflix and I've seen this really big documentary that's blowing up on social media, the Louis Theroux Manosphere documentary. Before we go into a little bit more detail, I just want to know if you've seen it.
I have, and I think that this is probably not the first time I've been exposed to the manosphere as well. But yeah, let's keen to get into it.
So for me, it was the first exposure to the quote unquote manosphere. And admittedly, a lot of what was being represented throughout the documentary was quite confronting. And I didn't like the picture that it painted. So
hmm
you just mentioned that you have had or heard of the manosphere before.
hmm
I'd love to know what that example was or when you came to, find what the
hmm
manosphere was before this documentary.
So I actually didn't realize that there was a term for, I guess, this male movement or whatever we would call it. For me, getting exposed to is probably when COVID hit. So we're talking years ago, like 6+ years ago, when this whole Andrew Tate movement happened. And I think that was when I was probably first exposed to it, where he had really extremist views on the role of men versus the role of women and how much more superior men should be in society versus
Mm.
women. And I think since then, we've kind of watched his journey on and how things happened. Pretty sure he got arrested at some point. He hasn't really had much of a social presence that I've seen since then. But an outcome, what we are seeing is people probably taking on this Andrew Tate-esque personality and now taking it and running with it and blowing it up so much so that I would say in the last couple years, we are seeing the manosphere movement take over and trend again.
Yeah, it is pretty scary to see. I remember going back to 2020 when I first heard of Andrew Tate as well. The first video I remember seeing from him was actually a positive one per se. So I didn't know who he was, but this video came up, and the video was talking about a bad day is coming. It's statistically proven a bad day will come into your life at one point, sooner rather than later. So live each day to the fullest, enjoy the sunshine on your skin because you never know what's around the corner. So I saw that video. It was COVID. People were, feeling pretty negative and down and out, as naturally we all were. And that video helped me feel a little bit more positive. So I downloaded it from TikTok, shared it on my Instagram, and within an hour and a half, I had like 4 or 5 direct messages from people. And they were like, take this down. Why are you promoting Andrew Tate? I can't believe you would share this message. And I was like, wait, what? Like, there's not a lot of points in my life where I genuinely have no idea who someone was, but this was one of them. So I'm looking at these direct messages and people are saying, like, he's a misogynist, take this down, so on and so forth. And I replied to one of these people saying, like, I genuinely don't know who this guy is. Like, who is it? And then they sent me a couple videos and I watched them and he's just spewing all of this shit that he's known for, right? Where he's talking down on women, talking
Yeah.
about how men are born in the world with no value, all of the crazy shit that Andrew Tate is known to say. And that was my first exposure with it. So I was like, ooh, okay, lucky I didn't go down that path and there were some people to sort of, reel me in a little bit and actually give me the exposure of who he really was. But it just made me realize that these young, impressionable males can be so easily influenced with just any messages that are being portrayed on the algorithm.
Yeah. And I mean, I think at that point in time as well, where we were in COVID and lockdown, there wasn't much you could do to entertain yourself. So it was probably the only way of and source of entertainment at that time. So I can see why even more so it was elevated because there wasn't anything to do. And he was probably leveraging the fact that everyone was locked down and needed a source of entertainment and probably then chose to have all these radical or he already had them, but he blew them up even more.
Mm. Yeah, and I think with Andrew Tate specifically, as much as I don't agree with his messaging, he is a master marketer. Like the virality of the content he was saying and just the amount of places he was just popping up. People who didn't even know who he was did within a couple months. And that sort of virality is very rare to see on such a large scale. And then from that, we've just seen this spew of manosphere, really misogynistic content come out of it, which has led to this, I guess, Louis Theroux documentary right now in 2026.
It's funny you say that because one of the things that I found when watching, so after watching Manosphere, this documentary, there were a couple other ones I tried to have a look at, a few podcasts and things like that. And something that constantly came through was how important the skill of selling and sales is and how much they put an emphasis behind it in the Manosphere. Everything that they do is revolving around what you said, marketing yourself. How do you sell yourself and this virality around it? So I think that it's really interesting that you bring up that point.
I guess going back to my own experience, I was 21 when I first saw that Andrew Tate video, and he's still relevant in 2026 to a certain degree. And I would argue the whole manosphere is larger than ever because it's getting so much attention at the moment. I was a young, impressionable male at that point in time, and even though that message didn't resonate with me, it's clear how many other young, impressionable males have picked up his messaging and just taken it as the Manosphere Bible, which is really concerning because we're seeing this mass male misogynistic almost outreach, I would say. And it's led to these, government initiatives such as the under 16 social media ban because we're wanting to protect kids from this form of content and other form of dangerous content. But I want to know from your point of view as a female, what are your thoughts on the messages being spewed and, the Manosphere documentary itself and everything that these quote unquote influencers were preaching?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting one, right? Because something that going into it, something that I've always had at the back of my mind is with all of these views, if you're just going to be the middleman within this whole, masculinity topic, it's not going to sell. It's not going to go viral. So something that I've gone into this knowing is that they have to rage bait. They have to clip farm. They have to have these crazy views because no one's going to pick it up. And then they won't continue to have this mass following or this cult like following. And then they won't make money. So that's always been on the back of my head. What's really interesting, and some of the themes that I've picked up, and I've actually written them down, is for me, how I see the manosphere is that it's very much males versus females. There's no equal. It is this debate. And I'm actually really curious as to when this even began. Why are we putting genders against each other and when did that happen? But yeah, we're seeing this shift of perhaps women now, especially within these Western cultures, have a little bit more or have a lot more freedom of speech, a lot more opportunities, and are being treated at the same level as males are. They're also in professions that generally used to be really male profound. So, lawyers, doctors, and the likes, and what you would call. And what I'm seeing from the manosphere is that males are unhappy with that. And they're not okay that women are speaking up or speaking and having a voice. And they're also not okay that they're now coming into this provider mentality and being grown up and taught how to be a male, quote unquote. So it's really interesting for me to see the representation of males versus females in this manosphere because it is actually shown as quite an extremist point of view. And we're not equal in this manosphere.
Yeah. What we are seeing is culturally, especially in Australia, these gender specific roles are becoming a lot more fluid now. And
Hmm.
I'm quite surprised when I'm watching these influencers talk about these quote unquote masculine traditional values. they were most likely raised in an era where these values didn't exist. For example, this idea that the women stay home and don't work and look after the kids, cook, clean, do all the housework, and the men are the ones, quote unquote, providing.
Hmm.
It hasn't been like that in a really, really long time, especially within Australia. So, my grandparents who are still alive, both of my grandparents grew up in a sorry, both of my grandparents worked, and my parents grew up in a household where both of their parents worked. And that was, late 60s, early 70s. So this idea that, oh, we need to go, well, and this is talking from the manosphere point of view here, that we need to go back to these traditional values, and women don't actually want to work and women just want to stay at home and have their life provided for them. I'm not seeing that. I didn't grow up around that. So this is just completely false and utter BS. So the fact that there are so many young, impressionable males hearing this and thinking, yep, like this is it, I'm going to treat women like this because that's how they're perceived that they want to be treated is really dangerous. I don't really know who's responsible here.
Hmm.
And that's something that I kind of want to dive deeper into this with you. Like, who do you think is responsible for this type of, content being spewed?
Yeah, it's interesting because who do we blame, and also who's going to help ensure that this doesn't happen? I mean, I think that women and males equally play a part and a role. I think to just add to what you said about what males are looking for, something I constantly hear them say is that they're wanting females to come into their divine feminine energy. And this is the reason they're pushing these views. They actually want to be the provider. They actually want to come home and add value to the women's life that they, are their wives, etc. Something that's also very interesting is that a lot of these men in the manosphere are raised typically, and this is just from a bunch of the cases that I've seen, they're raised by single women
Yeah,
or
I
solo
noticed that too.
parents, yeah, or maybe their fathers are around, but they're quite absent and they're not a great role model or father figure to the point where, they're seeing probably domestic violence or a little bit of alcoholism, etc. And what I find really interesting is that they talk constantly about how women and men aren't equal, yet their mothers are put on this complete pedestal that is untouchable.
Yeah, and not only that, I think the absence of having a strong father figure could potentially be why they want these views. Maybe because they never had that strong role model in their life. Therefore, that aspect is missing. So they think, okay, this is what it actually means to be a male. And maybe, and I'm really careful with what I say here because I
Mhm.
don't want to act like I'm defending these people. I don't. I'm really against it. But I'm just trying to provide a perspective that maybe this is how they're thinking. I could be completely wrong. But maybe because they saw their single mother struggle, they're thinking, I never want to be in a position where I see my partner struggle, and therefore I want to give them this really great life. But I would then say in rebuttal, wouldn't you want to be in a healthy relationship where your partner can actually, you know, challenge your thoughts and bring insight and other things that you can both collate with at the table? How boring would it be if you were just in a relationship where one person takes charge and you just followed? Like, that is so boring and so non-stimulating, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a really great point because don't you feel so one dimensional in your relationship when you have someone, to your point, that doesn't challenge you? If you want to come home and you want such an obedient wife, how do you have any sort of social stimulation or intellectual stimulation with yourself and with your partner? And how do you feel as though you're able to have complex conversations when all you're doing is going to work and selling this dream of being a man, and then you're coming home and you're probably just going to the bedroom with your partner because they're an
Mm,
object of sex then?
mm. Yeah, it's a really dangerous image that's portrayed here. most recently, I don't know if you watch Maths, but have you seen the clips of one of the Maths groomsmen from this season saying he wants a submissive woman?
I don't watch maths, so please tell me all about it.
Yeah, okay. So I'm sure there's probably a lot of people out there that have watched Maths, but this year there was a groom that went on and he kept saying that he's got traditional values. He wants a
Mhm.
submissive woman. He wants to have someone who, yep, he's the provider, he's the protector for. And he got this, he got this wife where she wanted those traditional values in her video, but she worked really hard. She was a real estate agent. She was a really strong, independent woman, and she was just calling out on his bullshit because he just kept saying, no, you're not having these traditional values that I'm after. I just want you to be submissive. And then she would question him, like, what does being submissive look like to you? And he just couldn't give answers. And then he would sit at the table with all these other groomsmen and wives, and they would just, call him out on his bullshit. Then he would go and sit in front of the experts and they would call him out on his bullshit. And then eventually they didn't work and they split off and, went to do their own thing. But it's just so interesting how these people want the traditional values in a society that's so modern. Like that idea of a relationship doesn't really exist.
Yeah, I mean, this one for me sounds like, and this is without seeing the clips or having not really a lot of context on it, but it actually just sounds like exactly what the Manosphere is about, which is, or at least my interpretation of it, which is hating for the sake of hating and having this extreme view without being educated. Now, I will say and add there are feminists that also uphold this exact same behavior where they want to hate for the reason of hating males and their views may not be educated and they talk about being equal, and yet their views show the opposite and it's actually about women being superior than men. And
Mm.
so I know we sit here and we talk so much about the manosphere because that's obviously trending, but as a woman myself, I think it's important to also say that we are seeing this from the other side of the argument, and it's just such an unrealistic representation of what a modern day woman and man is. I don't know if you read a lot about or saw a lot about this when you were looking at any of these documentaries, but this whole blue pill, red pill mentality.
Yeah, so I do, funnily enough, I've got my own story to share on the whole blue pill, red pill thing. I'm happy to get into, but just a question, just more a statement on what you just mentioned though. So you touched on how there's two sides of hate, like there's extreme feminism hate and extreme masculinity hate. And when
Mhm.
you look back over the timeline of society, when has hate ever won? I hate
Mhm.
hate has never been something that's come out on top here. And
Mhm.
interestingly, and I'm sure you noticed this too with the documentary, that some of them would keep saying like there's this war on masculinity, like there's society doesn't want men to be men. Like that's bullshit. No one is saying that. And when you get out of your filter bubble and you walk down the street and live a normal life, everyone is happy doing their part, doing their thing. Not a single person is like having this war that they're talking about. It's so stupid.
100%. It's a really great point. I don't know. I think to summarize before we move on as well, like it's what's interesting is this whole success thing to them, right? For me, what I've found, the three common themes that kept coming up. Success is shown in physical appearance, how much
Mm.
money you have, and how much women you're surrounded by or how many women you're surrounded by. And I think that it's just interesting to your point on hate is like, why are we hating? When did this whole men versus women thing happen? And why has it happened? Is it because for so long women felt like they weren't getting opportunities? So we finally spoke up. And now have we taken it too far? And now men are trying to reclaim some of that power back?
I don't see it as women have taken it too far personally. I think,
Hmm.
especially within Australia, like we're at this point where women and men should be treated equally. And I think the whole argument that we're not is bullshit, in my opinion. Like, I think men and women offer different aspects, but both are equal. Like, for example, there's no reason why a man and a woman can't do the same job if they both wanted to do it. And we're seeing a lot of that now. A great example is my younger cousin. She's a young female and she's doing a Sparky apprenticeship. I don't know what the perception of that would have been like, maybe 20, 25 years ago. But now it's great,
Mhm.
if she wants to be a Sparky, go be a Sparky. Likewise for men, if men want to go and be a nurse, like yeah, go and be a nurse. Like we're seeing like this fluid, like I don't know if gender roles the right way for it, but yeah, I guess for sake of argument, like fluidity of gender roles now, which I think is great, and that's something that we need to be celebrating a lot more. But
Yeah.
I'm just super curious, like where do you think these discussions are coming from? Because when you're online, you see it a lot more, but in society itself, I'm not really seeing it.
Agree. I don't know where these discussions are coming from. And although we can sit here and say, like, to your point, I do feel like, you were saying you do feel like it's equal. I completely agree that all of our mindsets are getting there. However, I don't know if society has caught up to how we think and feel about it. For example, we're still saying jobs that are apprenticeships are generally males dominant. It should get to a time where we're not saying actor and actress, we're just saying actor. There should be a time where we're looking at gender pay gaps. And yes, I know that they are being looked at, and I know that there is emphasis on it now, but I don't know if it's still at a spot or at a spot yet where we can confidently say that there is like it is equal, but I do think that we all have the right intentions to hopefully get it there someday.
Mm. Yeah, and I think we're slowly seeing that happen, which is good. One of the reasons why I think we are is I look at the reactions to the type of Manosphere content that's being spewed on social media, and as many people are supporting it, there's a whole argument for the people fighting against it, showing
Mm,
how misrepresented it is, how inaccurate it is, how misogynistic it is. So I think it's maybe slow progress, and maybe this is just a speed bump in that process, but I think we're collectively getting to that point because I would argue if you got a room of 10 people aged in their 20s, most people would probably not agree with the stuff being spewed on the manosphere.
yeah, I completely agree. Can I shift gears a little bit in terms of a kind of different topic to do with Manosphere?
Mm.
I want to get your thoughts on monogamy and how the typical relationship is perceived. Sorry, let me start again. I want to shift gears and talk about monogamy and how a relationship within the manosphere is talked about, perceived. So, for example, and I wrote a few quotes down that I saw in some of the documentaries. We hear men talk about how I love women, I understand women. We know what women need. They might know what they want. I don't want to be with a girl if she's a virgin, etc., etc. I want to hear your thoughts on that as a male, because obviously what we're hearing is that these men in the manosphere will only be with women if they're allowed to be in this polygamous relationship. So they're allowed to go and sleep with other women and they're allowed to do this kiss, maybe don't tell. But their wife or their girlfriends who are loyal to them at home aren't allowed to do that. They're supposed to be home cooking and cleaning and raising the kids.
Yeah, it's incredibly toxic, and it's not a mindset that I agree with at all, and never would. I think about if I hopefully one day am blessed to have kids, and if I have, for the sake of an argument, one male, one female, I would be mortified if both of them were in that sort of relationship. For the male, I would be really disappointed if they were treating their female partner that way. And then for the female, if they were in a relationship where their male partner treated them that way. And it sort of goes back to what we discussed earlier about this idea of coming into the relationship and being equal. This manosphere, they talk about men have this, whatever it is, instinct to go out there and always mate with other females. Like, that's just so fucking toxic. Like, if you're committed to someone in a relationship, You have to have the moral values to be faithful within that relationship, because I believe that's what makes you not only a good male but a good person, and that's what it should boil down to. I think the idea of, masculinity and femininity can get a little bit blurred when you talk about, different society and cultures. But it could just be boiled down to, are you a good person? Are you respectful to yourself and others? That's sort of how I personally view it. I don't think you are a respectful person and you are treating your partner with respect if you are saying the things that these people are saying and going and, dating multiple women, marrying multiple people, doing things behind other people's back. It's very wrong.
Hmm. I'm going to go out on a whim here and say that men in the manosphere who say this actually wouldn't be able to cope and deal with their partners going out and sleeping with other people because of their
Of course
deep-rooted
not.
insecurity. Yeah.
Well, of course not. Well, that's why I can't remember his name, but the Ranger from the Manosphere documentary, and he was asked by Louis and challenged, "Can your wife, or they weren't married, but he said, can your partner go and sleep with other men?" And he goes, "Absolutely not." Why? Why is it okay for you to do it, but they can't? Like, why is it only one way here? Like, and again, are you so insecure of yourself that you need to get that validation from all these other people? Like, you talk the big game, but you're actually quite small.
Yeah, I agree. And I am so team monogamy, but I do think that every relationship should have the right communications. For example, one relationship, they might want to be open, but if both partners are allowed to, one partner's allowed to do it, the other partner should be allowed to as well. And
Yeah, that's
if
the
you,
difference.
exactly. And if you feel like you're only entitled to that, well, I think then that's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's I keep saying I think. I'm gonna have to cut that out. But yeah, the entitlement is key here. They feel entitled that, no, this is my instinct as a male. I am born to do this. You are not born to do this. Therefore, I have greater value than you. Yeah, it's shit.
Yes. And one more point I want to add to this whole monogamy, how they interact with other females that aren't their wives. I think what's so funny about it all is how contradictory they are to a lot of the things that they say. So, a big example is they'll go out and sleep with women and treat women how they want to as a sexual object. And then they would come back and say, oh, but if my daughter ever acted like these women, I would completely disown her and be so disappointed in her.
Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, it's beyond wrong. And I this is where I can't believe these people have such a great following, because so many young, and I keep saying it, young impressionable males are listening to this, and then, they could be 14 years old. I can only imagine how they're treating other young girls in their
Mhm.
classroom. It would just be
Mhm.
beyond awful. And then, this is where how does the responsibility of parents come into this conversation
Mm.
here? Because if you're a young person and you're seeing this, and then you're going around and treating other males and females, really disrespectfully, what's the role the parents play here?
100%. I think you've nailed it on the head. How are we giving credibility to these type of men to be the role models and leaders for these young men and boys who are up and coming in the world? And so many times I hear all of these kind of leaders of Manosphere say, well, it's the parents' faults for me letting them view my content. They shouldn't be allowed to. But we live in a digital age where everything is so easily accessible that it would be so impossible for a parent to be able to give their son freedom and privacy, but then make sure that they're not being
Mm,
exposed to this kind of content.
mm,
And I think that you'd be in a corner where your hands are tied. And speaking to my own partner about this, he has said time and time again he would be terrified to raise a son in this day and age because of how much pressure it is on ensuring that they grow up to be a well respectable man, but also making sure that the media and the people around them who influence them and what they kind of take in is the right thing as they grow up. And,
Mm.
you know, I completely get it. It must be so difficult. And something that even Louis said, who directed the documentary, was something that inspired him to even start doing this documentary and this topic. And this was in a podcast interview with Chris Williamson, was he has 3 boys at home, and I think they had started coming to him with a couple of these tidbits and clips from people within the Manosphere. One of the big guys, I think Harrison Sullivan or HS,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and he kind of started getting really concerned because he was like, this is what they're exposed to, these young boys, as young as, like you said, 11 to 13.
Yeah. I can't comprehend how these males truly believe the messaging that they're spewing. HS said himself on the documentary, it's an attention-based economy, so he does everything he can to go viral. But
Hmm.
I truly believe people like Andrew Tate, everyone else on the Manosphere, they actually do believe the messages that they're saying here, which is really
Agree.
detrimental because they aim to promote positive masculinity in their eyes, right? But one of the things that they say is men are born without value and have to create that value themselves.
Hmm.
That's just so painful to hear because if you are someone who's struggling and you're at the depths, you have nowhere to go. You find these videos and maybe you find a little bit of comfort because you're in a community with other people who feel just like you do. And everyone's saying, yeah, you've got no value. Your value comes after you've got success, money. You know, the six argument. Have you heard of the six argument?
No, I haven't.
Well, it's like your value only matters if you make six figures, have a six pack, and are over 6 foot tall. So it's like,
Jesus.
okay, if I don't have those three criteria of sixes, who am I? What's my value? I've got none. And then maybe they just spiral into this deeper, darker hole where they end up just hating everything in the world around them, particularly women, which is so dangerous.
Yeah. Do you know what's really scary about this six mentality is it's 3 sixes, and 3 sixes normally signify the devil.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
it
isn't that a
does.
bit creepy? I mean, I
Yeah.
think what you're talking to all 100% makes sense. One thing I probably notice why these younger kids and men or boys are getting so swayed is because they are tapping into a lot of their insecurities and hardships. And so
For
as soon
sure, because they're master marketers. They know.
100%.
It's like what we
Yeah.
learnt at uni.
Mhm.
The only way to get a message to cut through is you tap on their emotions, whatever the emotion is. Excitement, adventure, thrill, pain, suffering. They're just tapping
Mhm.
into all of those.
And what's really sad though is that they are doing that, but then taking it to their advantage by benefiting or profiting off them because, you know, they get a percentage of their sales when they sign up to all these pyramid scheme courses and universities that they've got, you know, schools that they put out to how to be a man. And a lot of these kids are dropping out of school so early on to kind of follow this cult-like following, if you will. And it's really sad to see because they're literally stripping the mentality is to like make yourself uncomfortable, right? And basically be able to live in like this nothingness. So we're seeing people literally like live out of their cars or sleep in their cars for a period of time or sleep on the floor. So get rid of the
Yeah.
luxuries of having a bed. And it's just so sad because we don't have to live like this. You don't have to do that to prove that you're a man.
Nah, it's sad. One thing I did notice though, a lot of the people who are following the Manosphere themselves are often single males, which is really interesting. Like, obviously, for me and your partner, we've been in long term happy relationships for a long time now. So we know the messaging is bullshit. It doesn't work. It's really toxic and misogynistic. But then you see these kids and maybe other adults who follow the messaging. They're single. I think about the guy who went on maths. He's clearly single. It's not working. He has these views. There is a reason why these views don't work, and it's because they're so toxic. And everyday people in society are automatically going to be deterred to hang out with you. because your views don't align with their own morals and values, etc. Like you're not. Yeah, I don't know. I could go on. It's kind of frustrating me a little bit. I kind of want to just leave it there, but
Yeah. I mean, I
yeah.
think it's a good point. I don't even think that I think they are all single, but I also think that a lot of them potentially have gone through a breakup that might have been completely gut-wrenching, which is fair enough. Breakups completely do that. But what I found is that as soon as it gets hard and then their emotions come into it, it's like, no, we have to shut off. We're not allowed to be depressed. We're not allowed to be sad. Let's turn to this like manosphere mentality of like putting that aside and then hustling and just making sure that we don't process our emotions, because a lot of the people that have turned to this way of life, I've found, to your point, maybe they come in single or have gone through a really big breakup and have not processed it. And instead
Mm,
of going through the motions and going, all right, I guess this happens, they're not the right one, on to whoever's next, or let's get back out there and try again. They don't think like that. They don't want to
yeah.
do that. It's very much let's throw in the towel.
Yeah. Well, the same thing happened to me when I was real young. I think I was 19, maybe.
Hmm.
I had been out of a relationship. I went to one of my friend's birthday and there was this bloke there and he had just gotten out of a relationship as well. And he was telling me about this red pill thing. And I was like, oh, like the Matrix? Like, yeah, I know what the Matrix is. He's like, no, no, no. Like, it's this men, like, red pill mentality. Like, it will make you a really successful male. Like, do you know about it? And I said, no, I honestly have no idea what you're talking about. I've never heard of it before. And he goes, I'm going to send you this link. It's to like this red pill book. Read the book, like knowledge is power, and you'll get some really good information out of it, and it's going to change your life. So, me, young, impressionable male, I would have been like 19. He was a little bit older, I think maybe 24, 25 at the time. I would finish the party, exchange contact information. Next day, he sends me the link. Massive, like multi hundred page PDF from what I remember. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not reading this whole thing. I remember reading a couple bits of it, and at the time, I didn't know what I was consuming, but I remember this one part about it's called holding frame. And this idea of holding frame is like you have your morals and values and do not change them for anyone. If you believe something, hold your frame. And then when you enter a new relationship, the idea is that the woman latches onto your frame and you don't change. So I was reading this and I was like, oh, like I started doubting myself. Like, is that the reason why my relationship ended? Like, did I have a weak frame? You start questioning yourself and you just start doubting yourself. And then I went down the rabbit hole a little bit more. I read a couple other pages and it ended up being like pretty concerning. And what broke me out of that mindset, thankfully, was I sent it to one of my friends. I said, hey, like, you should read this, changed my outlook. I'm feeling a lot more positive about myself. And he
Hmm.
immediately went like, why are you reading this red pill incel garbage? And I was like, incel garbage? Like, I'm not an incel. Like, that was the most offensive thing anyone could ever say to me. I was like,
Hmm.
I don't associate with an incel. Like, I don't sit in my parents' basement all day. Like, I'm out, I'm active, I'm living a healthy lifestyle. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like,
Hmm.
what? And he goes like, no, this is really like toxic, misogynistic stuff. Like, have you actually looked into other parts of what they're saying? Have you gone on the red pill Reddit? Like, these people hate women. Like, they are misogynists. And I was like, oh, like, I'm not a misogynist. Like, I don't want to be, treated like that. Like, I don't want to treat other people like that. I don't want to be associated like that. So that was the thing that like shook me out of it. And thankfully, it was only like a short period of time, like a month and a half, 2 months. And then that was it. And I'm really glad I had a good friend pull me out of that and had knowledge of the situation. But it goes to show how easy it can be to fall into this trap and this cycle when you don't know what it is. And I think this is where we need to, educate males a little bit more and maybe implement it into the school system a little bit. Maybe it is already, it's obviously been a while since we've been at school, but making sure that these dangerous values and messages are identified and spread awareness. So, hey, do not treat people like this. Do not treat yourself like this. This is actually what you should be doing, and this is how you should actually be respectful.
Yeah, for sure. So just so that I have understood this whole red pill theory correctly, essentially what it is basically this alpha male and holding the fact that males and your values are completely 100% right and superior. Have I said that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, obviously, I didn't read the whole thing and I don't want to, but as far as I'm aware, the idea is that these are the values that make you a quote unquote alpha male. If you
Mhm.
do not have these values, you are not seen as an alpha male, and therefore women will not want you.
And they talk a lot about the red pill theory or mentality within the manosphere, right? So I assume that there's all these similarities between the two because it really pushes that.
Yeah, I think there would be a lot of similarities. It just makes me
Yeah.
wonder how this all started because back when I read it, it was 2019. Andrew Tate, as far as I know, like I said, I didn't know about him until a couple years later. Who wrote this shit? Like this would have been started by somebody. AI wasn't around back then. So
Yeah.
someone or a group of people would have had to actually write this and it's just spread over I don't know, decades maybe. Yeah, and it's to the point that it is now.
Yeah. So you've talked about red pill. Do you know much about blue pill?
I'm aware. I'm sure you're asking me because you know more about it. Blue
Correct.
pill is the complete opposite. So I think red pill treat the blue pill side of things as like they're the incels. They are the ones
Mhm.
that no one wants to be, but give me a lesson if that's incorrect.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding of it, I think you're pretty bang on it, but I think my understanding is that red pill don't want to be blue pill. They use this whole soft male, they see it as inferior. You don't have, you're not hardworking. You show your emotions. You want to be in these monogamous relationships, and you basically want this mundane kind of life that males kind of live. What my issue is and what I'm seeing is, especially when you put it like this, we compare like this red and blue pill. Why are we saying there's one end and then a complete other end? And a lot of the things that I've realized when you take some of these kind of skills and characteristics from red pill, right? Some things that are really great, hardworking, ambitious, they know what they want. They want to be this provider. Some of the great things from blue pill is, they do want to be in their live in their emotions. They want to be in these nice monogamous relationships, etc. What if we just combined it and made a purple pill where we
Mm,
combined some of these traits from both and call that the middle mundane man, which does exist, but they're not talked about because they're not interesting enough.
mm.
And they
I
probably
don't,
don't want the drama of this all.
yeah, I don't love the name mundane man personally because I feel like
Mm,
that devalues the hardworking
I agree.
everyday person. It gets so blurry though when they say males need to provide. Like providing has so many different ways. Like for example, if you are a stay-at-home dad, you are not a less than person, someone who's working a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 5 does not make you a less than person than someone who
Mhm.
is making a lot of money, who's got their own business. And
Mhm.
society functions when everybody's doing their part. And I've said it on another No Censorship podcast episode. There's nothing wrong with doing what you need to do to make your own contributions. You know, if you are in a relationship, you should both want to be equal and bring equal sides to the table. And this is where the conversation needs to be. Do you get into a relationship where you both have the same values? Obviously, that's where it's going to work. But if you have one value and your partner has another value and they do not align at all and there's no middle ground, of course the relationship's never going to work. So I
Mm.
think there's definitely elements that you can take from red and as you say blue and maybe form a middle ground purple pill for the sake of an argument. But I think removing it completely is probably the best thing to do here because it is just a social construct and that's where the danger can potentially be.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I completely agree.
So I wanted to find out a little bit more on what masculinity actually can be defined in and what some examples of positive versus toxic masculinity look like. Because As I mentioned on an earlier Instagram video this week, as someone in their mid to late 20s, I don't really know what positive masculinity actually looks like. I know what it means to be a good person, but how can I define positive masculinity when I don't really know what it is myself? So, to help me do that, I've got my laptop here and I just want to read a few of the examples. One of them is strength as resilience versus strength as dominance. Resilience. Your mate is going through a tough time and you check in on him. Sit with him and actually listen. You lose your job and instead of spiraling, you regroup and ask for help and rebuild. You cry at a funeral and don't apologize for it. Versus dominance. You can't admit you're wrong in an argument because it feels like losing. You mock other guys for showing emotion because it makes you feel stronger by comparison. You use physical size or aggression to get your way. Another example is protection as care versus protection as control, which a lot of these manosphere influencers talk about. They want to be the provider and the protector. So, care. You walk your partner to their car at night because they asked you to. You speak up when you see someone being harassed or bullied. You look out for younger guys in your workplace or social group. Versus control. You check your partner's phone because you call it keeping them safe. You tell her what she can or can't wear under the guise of being protective. You make decisions for people without asking them. And then the final example is identity as confidence versus identity as superiority over others. Confidence. You back yourself in a job interview without needing to put anyone else down. You're comfortable when a woman earns more than you or is better than something at you. You don't need validation from a group to feel secure in who you are. Superiority. Your self-worth depends on women being beneath you. You put other men down to climb the social ladder. You feel threatened by equality because your identity was built on being above someone rather than secure in yourself.
Interesting.
Mm. It is interesting, isn't it? Because it also talks about not just putting women down, but also putting other men down to make yourself feel stronger and bigger. So,
Yeah.
this idea of toxic masculinity is a lot more than just being a misogynist. It's honestly being a shit person to everyone around you, really.
Hmm. And I think what was good about that is we can sit here and talk about it and talk about the essence of it, but actually showing tangible examples where they are applicable and what we mean by the differences, I think is a lot more beneficial to people and these younger men out there to
Mm.
actually see what we mean by this, because otherwise we're just sitting here telling everyone to change and not helping them or helping them understand what actions and behaviors do need to change.
Yeah, and that's the most important side. And one of the reasons why we wanted to talk about this episode today, or this topic, for example, because there's so much emphasis and so much focus on the toxic side of masculinity and the toxic side of, misogyny. But what does it actually look like when you're talking about healthy masculinity, and where do these young impressionable males go when maybe they are feeling lost and they recognize that these messages are harmful, but where do they turn to for the right advice or the right information, and making sure that they're not falling in the same hole? And that's part of the conversation that we want to have and be part of on the No Censorship podcast, where these conversations and topics can actually, be discussed, and the whole side of the topic and the whole side of the argument can be shared.
Hmm. And not to throw you on the spot, but I think something that would be really beneficial if I was in that boat of not knowing who to turn to and who the right role models are in society, because sometimes we're not blessed with having parental figures in our life or teachers or all the like that can show us really great examples and behaviors of how to grow up and be a really great man in society. Is there anyone that comes to your mind who maybe are public figures that you would recommend and say, actually, these people show a lot of these great skills?
Mm, yeah, there are a few. One that comes to mind immediately is John Cena. He's done a lot of work in the activism
Interesting.
space. Yeah, in the activism space, he's done a lot of charity work. He's known for granting the most make-a-wishes. He's just overall perceived to be a really nice, genuine person. And he has qualities that make a really good role model. For example, yes, he is physically strong, but I would say he's emotionally strong as well. There's most
Mm,
recently a clip of him at a convention, and a guy gets up to speak to him and he asks a question saying, I'm suffering from cancer. I've had multiple surgeries, multiple treatments, and you are the person who's given me strength. And he asks John Cena for a hug, and John Cena just walks down, gives this guy a hug, and has a private chat with him for a few minutes. And it's this really nice
so
emotional
lovely.
moment where he's just seeing the other person as the human he is, and he's not seeing like he's not being John Cena the celebrity. He's meeting him as John Cena the person. And
Yeah.
it's just really nice. It's showing how you can be emotionally strong and physically strong and just a respectful, all round decent person. So
Yeah.
that's immediately one that comes to mind. Who else would be?
I think it's so hard though, right? And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but some people don't want to be role models because of the pressure on it. And I think
Mm,
that example that you just showed, he was probably he's not trying to be. I think he's just organically such a great guy that we can turn to for that.
yeah, I think so. But this is where a lot of people say athletes specifically can be role models. And then I've heard athletes say, well, it's not my responsibility to be the role model. And it's like, sure,
Mm,
yeah, it might not be your responsibility, but you are in the public eye and these people look up to you. So therefore, you do hold a level of accountability and responsibility to be a decent person and make sure that these people can actually look up to you, whether you like it or not, and show that you have decent morals and values that they can potentially replicate.
All right. So we've had some really great conversations so far. We feel like there is probably so much more that we want to and we can speak on this topic. So, what we're going to do is make this a two-parter. So, thank you for listening as always. We really hope that you got something out of our first episode on the Manosphere. Tune in because part two will be coming shortly after this, where we kind of get a little bit more into the cultural side of it, talking about the role of women within this conversation. James, I might quickly throw to you before we summarize if there's anything else you want to add in before we end it here.
Yep. The favorite segment of the No Censorship podcast, the audience submitted segment. So if you want to know what the audience has submitted for us to answer, that will be in part two. So hope you've enjoyed this. Let us know in the comment section below. Give us a follow and a like rating, and we'll see you over in part two.